Okay, welcome back. So if you're landing on this video because you watched the previous high-level overview, well, welcome. I'm going to show you how I built this in BigIP Access Policy Manager using the new capability DeviceID Plus. And so you probably have a really good understanding of what DeviceID Plus is already, kind of how it works. Let's take a look at the BigIP portal, actually the F5 Cloud Services portal first, and then get into the BigIP. Okay, let's do that now. All right, so here is the portal. And you're going to go to portal.cloudservices.f5.com. I'm going to put that link down in the description so you can log in. You're going to have to create a username and password account if you don't already have one. As mentioned in the previous video, this is where we host all of our SaaS applications for security, right? So things like web application firewall, analytics and monitoring, global DNS, et cetera, et cetera. And here you're going to find the device ID. And so you would click on device ID after you logged in, right here up in this top left where it says free device ID. You would click there, and then we would get started, right? And this is super, super easy. So you click on Java Snippet, or you click on the BigIP to download the iApp. So there's two ways to get this configured. JavaScript snippet, all it happens when you click here and you click next is, and my head's kind of blocking everything here, so I'm not gonna, there's really nothing underneath here. It has an area for you to test. But basically you just copy and paste this JavaScript snippet and then you paste it into your BigIP or into your application. Again, I mentioned earlier, you don't need a BigIP to get this working. You can put this right on your application. So there's two ways to do that. There's actually three ways, right? You can use the JavaScript, put it on the BigIP or on your application, or you can develop or deploy the BigIP iApp. And the iApp, you would download right here. So you can see it's got a download right above my head there. Download the DeviceID Plus app template, iApp template. You get that down, upload it to the BigIP, and then you would start to configure that template, and you would use this special unique link that they give you here, which is dip.zeronaut.com, and it's got something, a whole bunch of garbly stuff in the URI. That's very unique for this JavaScript. And you would paste that into the iApp, assign it to a virtual server, and boom, you're off and running. I didn't configure it this way because my demo is a little different. I'm using a web top, and so I've injected the JavaScript into the actual web top through a message box, and I'm going to show you how that's done right now. I'll log out from this, right? Because I'm going to show you where you find the cookie in a minute if you're not familiar. Okay, so I mentioned that JavaScript, right? So if you're familiar with BigIP, and I'm going to make some assumptions that you are, okay? If you're not, then reach out to your account team. If you have BigIPs in your organization, we can get you some free training. We have some great labs that get you started with Access Policy Manager. However, let's beyond the scope of this video. So I'm going to make those assumptions that you have some knowledge of BigIP and hopefully Access Policy Manager. And so this is Access Policy Manager. This is where we're going to go here to customize, right? And so we're going to come into our profiles and policies, and we're going to click Advanced Customization Advanced. Okay, and we're going to go to Access Profiles. This is my profile I have here. I'm using a macro, so it's going to be under macros. So some things are nested here. Don't let this intimidate you. It's just a way that you can customize the BigIP APM standard templates, so to speak, if that's what you want to call it. So BigIP APM is extremely flexible. You can customize anything. Everything you see on the page that you log into, if you land on a portal, what we call our web top in Access Policy Manager, all of that's customizable, from the icons to the CSS you can reskin it to make it your own. Remove all F5 branding and make it your own. So it's highly customizable. With that being said, there are some areas in here that you don't want to fool around with if you're not a front-end developer, because you will break. You can reset, but you'll break things if you don't know what you're doing. So let's click on our message box. And so if you, we're going to show the demo again here in a minute, because I'm going to show you where I see the cookie being delivered. And so here is where I'm injecting the JavaScript, and I want to show you where that is. So in the instructions in the portal page, it tells you to inject it after the head tag in HTML. So if we scroll down, this is the head right here, right? This is what we're instructed to do in this cloud services portal, right? It tells us right here. Again, this is like 3 steps, super easy to deploy. Copy the code below to insert after the head tag, and that's the ending head tag, right? So we come back over here, look at our customization. I did just that. I dumped in that JavaScript right here, right after the head tag. I saved it, and now I'm completely finished. I'm done. As far as I'm concerned, the cookie is now going to be delivered to my application, and I should be able to act on those secure hash, those secure cookies. And let's take a look at what that is going to look like. So let's open our developer tools, and let's go to, I'm using Firefox, which I normally don't use, but that's okay. We're going to get what we need out of here. All right, so let's click here. Let's proceed to the application. Our identification matches, so we're going to be let in. Now let's take a look at one of these gets here, right? And then let's take a look at our cookies. And here's our cookie that we're looking for. So we want to match on IMP APGR. This is the name of the cookie. And this is documented, right? And I actually have an iRule. I'll post this on my GitHub. I'm going to dump in a copy of my policy and a copy of the iRule that I'm using to, one, parse out the cookie being returned and then format it and then put it into a session variable in Access Policy Manager so that we can do something with it. Because you first need to put it into a session variable so that you can act on it, right? You can do compare, deny. You can do all sorts of different logic, conditional logic on it if you have a variable assigned. And so if we can see here, oh, you can't see it because, hey, guess what? I'm blocking the, let me get my big head out of the way here. There we go. So if we look at the this right here, IMP-AG, this is the cookie, and this is the value. So there's 2 cookies here. There is the DIA, which is what they call the residual, and then there's the DIB right here, which is called the attribute. And in the previous video, I showed that there are 2 cookies. I'm not going to get into, again, what they totally are. We have some documentation that kind of explain them, but Shape uses 2 cookies because there are times where a user may upgrade their software. They may upgrade their browser or something, and the hash is going to change if they do that. And so you don't want to create a lot of friction with users if those type of things happen, which they do commonly happen. So we have 2 cookies here, right? So the attribute cookie is much less chance to really change versus a residual cookie. But we use both to really be sure that it is the user and that we're not perhaps creating, or we may run into a collision. And a collision is where a user or different users present the same hash. We don't want that to happen ever. Can it happen? Yes, but Shape is very good at modifying and keeping up with their code and improving it to make sure that never happens, right? And so these are the cookies, and we can see that in the developer tools. So if you're not familiar with developer tools, I highly recommend that you get used to them, get familiar with them. Excuse me, every major browser has one, and I'm using Firefox here. So after we have this, what I decided to do is I was going to hard code I'm going to hard code these hashes into Active Directory. And I chose Active Directory because I work in the DoD space. They use Active Directory very much. It's just about every organization does. Every organization I've worked for in enterprise uses Active Directory. But you can store this anywhere. You can store this in any kind of database, right? It's really up to you. This is easy because, again, Active Directory is available. It is a database. And we can query Active Directory very easily to get this information. So now that I have the cookie, I have this machine, I have the user, I can then go into, let's open up our RDP session window here, right? Let's go to that's ADSI edit. Now I want to go to my user, right? So here's my Active Directory user account, and where do I have that? Here we go. So I have hard-coded these attributes, or these hashes, into two attributes. I'm using home and I'm using pager. Now, you could create your own attributes, right? It requires you modifying the schema. I didn't want to mess with any of that. I just wanted something simple and easy to do. So I used home and I used pager attributes, and I stuffed these hard-coded hashes in those attributes. And this is what Big IP Access Policy Manager is calling. It's calling this Active Directory, it's calling and checking these two attributes when it does the match of the hashes from the cookie being presented by the client and what's stored in Active Directory. Okay, oh, and you can also see the mobile, right? You can see my cell phone numbers there. So if you want to, hey, you want to buy some F5, some Big IP, you now have my cell phone number. So let's move on to, let's get out of here. We see Active Directory. I'm not going to get in how you create an Active Directory server and get it domain. There are plenty of videos for that. I just wanted to show you where we're pulling the attributes from. Okay, so let's go back to our desktop, right? And let's take a look at the, first, let's take a look at the iRule. All right, let's take a look at the iRule. So iRule is going to be in local traffic. And I've named it log device ID. And this is the code, right? So 90% of this I stole or was given to me from other shape engineers, F5 engineers who started work on proof of concepts to get something working on the Big IP. And so I've added only the two lines, which are the access session dataset lines. And what these do is they're going to take the decoded or the regex that has pulled these cookie hashes out of the cookie, and it places them into variables. And I've named these variables session.custom.deviceid.a and .b. And what this does is it will place those values into these custom session variables where I can then do some cool things with, right? So let's take a look at what that looks like right now. So I believe I have a current session open. Yeah, I have a few sessions open. So let's take a look at this session here, and we can see that custom variable being set in Access Policy Manager. And so if we scroll down to right here, we can see our two hashes. So where you saw that iRule, that is firing as soon as an HTTP request is made. It's pulling the cookie, it's parsing the cookie, and then storing it into this variable, two variables. And then I store these in the session, and now I can do something with it. I can do a match, right, to see if the device ID matches with what I have stored for this device in Active Directory. Pretty simple. All right, so let's take a look at our policy. I'm going to remove my head because I want you to see the entire thing here. All right, cool. Now my head's gone, disappeared. So the policy starts right here. It starts with log device ID. And this is a policy event agent in APM. And again, APM is fairly intuitive. It moves from left to right. So a user, as they enter into your policy, will traverse from left to right to either an end, where they're either approved access or they're denied. And in this case, we put this logging event or this iRule event agent at the very front to grab the cookie, parse it, and throw it into a session variable so we can use it later. So this is what we're doing first. And this is all this is that we use the ID of the iRule, the name of the iRule. It's very important that you do that it matches exactly what's in the iRule with what you log as the ID, the identification here. So APM knows that it needs to go out and call that particular iRule to do what it's got to do. All right, so then we move on and we've got our message, our United States government warning banner, right? And this is what we see when we hit here. Let me show you again. Let me log in so we can see and play along at home. All right, so this right here is this part right here, right? And we've done some custom work here, right? So we've actually gone into our policy and did some customization, right? So we went where we were when we injected our JavaScript. That's where we've got all of this special code that we, remember when I said that it was very flexible, you can customize things? So this is much more fancy, this is a lot fancier than your typical message box that you're going to get out of the box. So if you can develop front ends, you can do all sorts of cool things with big IP. And that's what you're seeing right here. So then we're going to click OK to proceed to application, and we're logged in, right? So what we did there is that then we moved on after we clicked. We then did an on-demand cert auth. And you didn't see the cert being requested there, probably because it's cached. But what we're doing is we're requesting a cert from the client. In this case, I'm hard coding a variable because I don't have the right extensions on my cert. So again, I had to improvise here a little bit. Then we're doing an AD query. And this is where some of the magic happens, right? So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, Active Directory, get me the mobile attribute value, get me the home phone value, and get me the pager value. And these two values right here are the ones that have that stored hash or cookie. And this is the one we want to match against, right? And then the mobile is obviously just my cell phone. So when these get pulled by Active Directory, we can see that, what happens here, back here, we go back to our active sessions and we look at our session variables. We can see right here, mobile, right? So that's one of the attributes that we want pulled. And you can see that APM went out, queried it, and put it in a variable so we can now use. So we have those variables stored. Now what we do is we do a device ID match right here, right? And what we're doing here is just some very simple logic. What we're doing is we're taking those variables that we've now stored, the cookie from the client and what's stored in Active Directory, and we are matching them. And if they match, then if we look at the branch, right, the branch is very intuitive. They will continue on this branch. Device ID plus is a match. It's a success. I've got some Office 365 logic here. It's not part of this solution. But then after that, they get passed to the web top. They get a full resource assigned. So then they see this. They've been authorized. Now what happens if they don't match? Well, if they don't match, they then fall down to, let me get my head back in here, right? So if they don't match and they come here to the login page, which we call a login page, you can rename these boxes. And this is where it's asking me for that PIN. It's asking me for my cell phone number. And so we prompt the user and say, hey, we need your cell phone. All right, put your PIN in there. And then we have the additional auth request here that says, more logic that says, if the cell phone number matches what we have in Active Directory for their mobile, then we're going to say, hey, they're good to go. They are who they say they are, and we're going to pass them down the same branch that we saw up here. They get access, and they're allowed. If they don't match, then we're going to deny. And so that's it. From a very high level, that's how the policy works. Those are all the moving parts in Access Policy Manager. I will say also that in your local traffic, when you create that virtual server, you have that virtual server that has your policy connected to it, right? So you're going to have resources assigned to it. You're going to want to make sure that that log device ID iRule, that agent you're calling from the policy, is attached to the virtual server. And so again, I will place a copy of the policy and a copy of the iRule in a GitHub link below so that you can use it as a template to help you get started. And if you have any questions about this, please reach out or pop in some questions in the comments below, and we'll be certain to get back to you as soon as we can. So hopefully this was helpful and informative, and you're able to use this new free feature, functionality, capability from Shape and F5, which I think is super powerful, and again is absolutely free, where it would normally cost you lots of money, a lot of resources, and a lot of time to develop, but it's all being done for you now. And so this was just one use case. You could do, well, let your imagination run, right? You could do all sorts of really cool stuff with this. And remember, you're getting a cool dashboard in January as well. And I can't wait to see that. But I'd love to hear your feedback. Again, if you have some questions, concerns, if you think this is great, if you think this is ho-hum, hey, let us know. Put the comments down below. And until next time, I'll see you then.